I'm Dennis Brown. I'm 60 years old. I serve as the Emergency Management Director for Lewis County. Work with the Lewis County Sheriff's Office and other county offices. I also serve as the publisher of the Lewis County Herald and manager at WKKS Radio. At age 50, I hadn't had any symptoms of any kind. I had no family history of cancer of any kind, including colon cancer. When Cologuard became available, I readily took that test. The initial one 4 or 5 years ago came back negative. My family physician, Dr. Barcelona, here at Primary Plus, I went in for my, I call it a 100,000-mile checkup before my 60th birthday, and asked Dr. Barcelona to let's run all of the tests, catch me up on all of my vaccines and immunizations that I need. We'll make sure everything's good as I get ready to turn 60. We did all of those tests, caught me up on immunizations, and we didn't discuss at that time a colonoscopy, but he did recommend Cologuard. We did take that test. The initial results on Cologuard came back inconclusive, and that prompted the request from Dr. Barcelona to refer me to another doctor where we scheduled a colonoscopy. The Cologuard test is very simple. It comes to you in the mail. It's in an unmarked box. You take the test. It's a sample that you take. The instructions are very clear, very simple, and you return it in the mail. The results are then just sent back to your doctor. Dr. Barcelona called me with the results of that test, and we followed up after that. The colonoscopy, of course, more involved. It is an invasive procedure, but not as bad as you might think. The preparation probably is the worst part of that. So a couple of days before you have a prepared liquid that you'll drink, there are some medications that you take to prepare for that. The procedure itself is very simple. It's well explained. There's no discomfort at all, and in no time it's over. You're back out in the recovery room, and everything's good. From the time Dr. Barcelona contacted me with the results of the Cologuard test, we soon scheduled for a colonoscopy. Dr. Barcelona recommended, and I readily accepted that on his recommendation. We scheduled for the colonoscopy. It was scheduled just in a short time. I think early August was when the colonoscopy was, and following that, he came back after I was in the recovery room. Came back where my wife Tammy and I were, and said that he wasn't able to complete the colonoscopy, that he had encountered a mass of some size because he had tried even a smaller scope and wasn't able to get past that mass. He had taken some samples, had taken a biopsy, and said that he would send those off for pathology. We would get the results in a few days, and he would get us back in to discuss those at that point. But just hearing the news that he had discovered mass was pretty scary right then, and until those results came back, we were concerned quite a bit. Dr. Weller, who performed the colonoscopy, called back in a few days with the results of the pathology from that biopsy he had taken. Tammy and I went back down to receive those results, and he informed us at the time that it was confirmed as an adenocarcinoma. Of course, I had to go back and look up to see what exactly that was. He answered all of my questions, all of the questions that we had at that time. But there was kind of an initial shock there, so it was a few days before we were able to fully realize what that was, but he also, at that time, quickly referred me to a surgeon in Lexington, Dr. Bellin in Lexington, to meet with him and then discuss surgery for removal of that mass. We scheduled fairly quickly with Dr. Bellin in Lexington to meet with him. He would be the surgeon who would be charged with removing that portion of my colon that had that mass in it. So Tammy and I went to Lexington. We met with him. From the results that he had received from Dr. Weller of that biopsy, he fairly quickly scheduled a surgery there at St. Joseph Hospital in Lexington, and at that point said that he wouldn't know, and using his words, until he got in there, the extent of the procedure, and it ranged from removing a portion of my colon that had that mass in it to removing my entire colon, depending on the extent that he saw when he was there during the surgery, and there was a possibility of an ostomy at that point also. So we were scheduled for that surgery just within a few weeks. September 27th was when the surgery was scheduled for St. Joseph Hospital. And of course the surgery happened. I was in recovery for a while later that evening, and the surgeon came in, Dr. Bellin came in, my wife Tammy and I were there in the room. He had described then that once he got in there, that he had determined the best path to take would be to remove my entire colon. So they did a complete colectomy. And at that point, he also made a stoma, an ileostomy, which came from my small intestine, and bypassed that area of surgery to allow it to heal. So the stoma, the ileostomy, temporary. So we planned to come back then. He said he planned to come back in a few months. We would reverse that ileostomy after things healed up. And then he had also told me that he sent the specimens that he had collected to pathology. He, in addition to my colon, removed, I believe it was 23 lymph nodes and all of the connective tissues. So he sent all of that to pathology and said that he would report back when those results came in. I think was in the hospital about 4 days. The next day, after Tammy and I had returned home, my phone rang, and it was Dr. Bellin. He said that he had received the results back from pathology, and it confirmed that it was adenocarcinoma, that he believed he had gotten the entire mass, and he said that there were, it was clear on each side, which meant that the portions that he had gotten out, he believed he had gotten all of the cancer cells out of there. The lymph nodes tested negative for any signs of cancer. So at that point, Dr. Bellin and we, with the news, were happy with that. Dr. Bellin referred us to an oncologist who was at Maysville, Dr. Anderson. He said that we would meet with him, determine from there if we needed to do any scans or what the next step would be. Scheduled with Dr. Anderson, who on our initial visit there recommended a blood test that he called experimental. He recommended it. He'd been using it for a while and had had good results with it, and that test would compare my blood on that day with the exact cancer cells from the biopsy that had been taken earlier. So we did get a blood sample on that day. He sent that to a lab, and it was, we were expecting in a couple of weeks to hear results back. I think it was closer to about 4 weeks. It took them a while to culture that and get the results back. And we received a negative result from that test, which was, of course, good news, indicating that there were no lingering cancer cells at all in my body from that initial adenocarcinoma. So what we had planned that morning was going to be a simple reversal of that stoma. After Dr. Bellin began the surgery, discovered a mass. And went ahead at that time, removed that mass, which he said was the size of a mango, removed that mass, and it extended, of course, the length of that surgery. And I learned about it. He wasn't expecting it either, of course. So I learned about it that evening in the hospital room. Tammy and I heard it at the same time. He had sent, of course, the pathology off on that, and was still in the hospital about 3 or 4 days later when the results of that test came back. And before he made the round, he called me on the phone and said, I just wanted to call you, I just got the news from pathology, and the results are that it is benign, it was scar tissue, and we got it all out, so here's the good news. In the last year, from the time that I went what I thought would be a routine checkup with Dr. Barcelona, and they're always pleasant. We do those checkups and we talk a little bit, and no bad results. This kind of started a roller coaster of emotions, of news, expecting good news, getting not good news. We have had tremendous support from our family, of course, from our church family, and from the entire community. We know that many prayers have been said, prayers have been answered. The final result and the last news that we have is that I'm cancer-free. And a lot of those journeys don't go that route. From the time I heard that they believed they had caught it early until we heard that they had gotten the entire cancer mass out, that there were no cancer cells in my body, and the latest news, and following a successful stoma reversal, I was back to normal, and with news cancer-free. That was a short journey for many cancer patients, but by the early diagnosis, by the screenings that are available, and the technology that we have today, I think that the procedures that were performed and the early diagnosis did save my life.